Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining EVED's educational series for Better Buying. Today's discussion is about spend visibility, what it is, why it's important, and how it has become one of the hottest topics in the event industry today. My name is Talia Mashiach, and I am the CEO and founder of EVED. EVED is the market leader in event commerce. We automate the buying and selling for meetings and events. As a passionate technologist back in 2004, I wanted to bring a bold solution to an industry that desperately needed technology. I picked the meeting and event industry. I knew in order to deliver a solution, I needed to be knee-deep in the industry, so I started an event company and grew it from 0 to 9 million in just 4 years before I sold it. I then felt I had the depth and experience to launch a global platform across the entire event supply chain that would automate the buying and selling of meetings and events. Today, EVED has over 5,500 users and has processed over 50 million in transactions by providing supplier management and supplier purchasing solutions to buyers and operational and proposal development solutions for sellers. I want to welcome everyone to the first session in our two-part Better Buying education series. I'd like to thank Site, our strategic partner, for collaborating with us on the series. And I'm excited to be able to share this with you guys. Over the next hour, you're going to hear from executives from procurement, associations, and third-party event companies about the importance and the benefits of spend visibility. At the end of today's session, your takeaways will be an understanding of what spend visibility is, why it's important, how it allows for better negotiating power with your suppliers, how it improves your supplier partnerships, and lastly, how it saves cost and time. Feel free to tweet live during the panel discussion. You can follow the conversation on Twitter, mentioning at EVED Marketplace and Talia at EVED CEO. We also want to have a really interactive session today, so we encourage everybody to submit their questions. You can do this throughout the discussion. You just go into your chat box and you can type your questions there on the left. At the end, I'm going to leave 15 minutes and select a couple of those questions to ask our panelists. So please put them in throughout the presentation today, and then we will collect them at the end so we can answer them. I'd like to begin by introducing our panelists today, and I want to thank them all for being here and taking their time. We have a great group today. Allison Summers is the Managing Director at Site and Site Foundation International Foundation. In her tenure at Smith Buckland, she has served Site and the Site International Foundation, and today holds the role of Chief Staff Officer and partners with volunteer leaders to deliver meaningful products and services to members in 90 countries. Eric Samuelson is the VP of Strategic Sourcing at Jack Morton. He's the industry's first procurement professional embedded within a top global marketing agency whose sole focus has been developing procurement technologies and methodologies specific to enhancing the marketing process. Over the last decade, Eric has developed a comprehensive marketing procurement platform and generated in excess of 100 million of cost reductions for his agency's clients. Lastly, we have Jason Wolfe, who's the Global Commodity Manager at Dell Computers. Jason is responsible for the development and implementation of strategic sourcing plans for a set of products and services that are utilized across Dell's various sites and locations. He has provided thought leadership from a procurement perspective and influenced business partners to consider new and creative strategies. Jason initiated and conducted saving strategies and policies on over 200 million of spend for events across the global business partner. He is truly an innovator leading significant changes to our industry. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So we are going to get started. The first question I have for our panelists is, how procurement's role is changing. Over the last decade, we've seen procurement's role changing in regard to the meeting and event sector. My question for you guys is, what are some of the changes that you've seen? And Jason, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Talia. So earlier you kind of mentioned the role of procurement, at least at Dell. I am the events global commodity manager, so I do the sourcing plans and negotiate strategies and better ways to save within this marketing subcategory. So with the question of how procurement's role is changing, we're really getting embedded a lot more in the event industry. The spend category for events has been, without a procurement leader really since its implementation. I'm the first true procurement commodity manager for the event space. So we're really able to get in there and come up with a true preferred vendor list. That's the main area that we're coming into. We're negotiating better rates. We're getting strategic sourcing policies in place and procedures in place, and really working with the event managers on abiding by these policies and procedures, and really taking the whole procurement aspect into the event space as a whole. And by doing so, and I know we'll get into this later, we're really able to see a true vendor list as well as savings in the market.
Great, thank you, Jason. So Allison, in your position, you've had the opportunity to really be exposed to a lot of different things. What are you seeing that's kind of changing, procurement's role is changing?
Yeah, well, on the site side, we've been having education and conversations for quite a while about the growing role of procurement, and we've started benchmarking the data. So we did a recent purchasing motivation travel study with IMEX, and 55% of the respondents said that corporate procurement or purchasing departments are having a stronger influence in the decision-making process. And the interesting thing, is that the data that's moved is that 47% say that decision maker is at a higher level of management. So all of these trends that we're talking about today, we've been seeing them, and it's really about what to do with them. And we think it just continues to tell us that the ability of either the corporate event planner, the third-party event planner, or even the supplier to truly be able to have a concise conversation with procurement is just vital to what everybody does.
Great, thanks, Allison. So let's talk a little bit about like, why is procurement involved? Like, what are they really hoping to achieve? What's the goals there? Jason, let's start with you.
Okay, yeah. So procurement getting involved mostly because event managers weren't out there properly negotiating the contracts. There were no professional sourcing strategies involved with vendor selection. In the past, we've seen a lot of event managers selecting a vendor for various reasons. One, maybe because they've always used that vendor and they're just going with the rates that they're provided, or two, maybe they had a sit-down lunch with the vendor, liked their personality, had a good time with them, so decided to add them to the vendor list. Although those are, okay, it's really not the preferred method on getting the cost reduction or the rates that are preferred and that you could use procurement to get to. So how we're fixing that is we've really put RFPs in place, bidding and approval thresholds. No longer will the event manager be out there running their own negotiating tactics. It's procurement driving this now. And with vendor selection, we're really working on, with these RFPs, we're out there looking at the vendors that these event managers have used in the past. We're taking their inputs and advice. We're building matrices for these specific vendors when we run the RFPs, and that's kind of how we weigh the winner of the RFP. By doing this, we'll see a lot of discounted rates because they know they're going to be a preferred vendor, so they're able to offer us a better rate because they have the guarantee of business by being on a preferred vendor list. And those are just a couple examples. So overall, the involvement of procurement has benefited the whole corporation from the event space. So and good for me that the business partners have really taken a like to the procurement aspects and the policies and procedures that we are driving within our commodities.
Great, thank you, Jason. So Eric, what's your perspective on this? What do you think is going on here?
Well, hi everybody. I would consider myself rather unique in that I am strategic sourcing within an agency. At Jack Morton, we manage hundreds of global clients, and we manage on behalf of those clients approximately $300 million of spend annually. And as you might imagine, things happen rapidly, and we have an enormous amount of client groups, creative, strategy, and production, all of whom have to engage with third-party suppliers. So my purpose is to first understand how production in the event world actually works. I've literally grown up within the agency over the past 15 years. And so what I've learned is that procurement's role within the marketing or event marketing space, in order to be effective, you first have to understand the context with which everything is taking place, both from the production side, the agency side, and both from the supplier side. So if procurement can take the time and understand from a supplier perspective the information that they need in order to A, provide a quality service or product, and B, get the information that they need so that they can provide the more aggressive pricing or services, and then understand how the services are provided and how that directly influences cost down the line is vitally important. And then it's also taken a while, but I've been able to accomplish this, is getting the trust and understanding of all the event managers and get them to understand that procurement is really there to assist them through the entire process, to support them with their relationships with their suppliers, and really give them back the time that they need to focus on their real job, which is event marketing. So between the two, it's really understanding how time really influences and impacts the overall process, which actually comes down to reducing costs. And if procurement can come to a great understanding of the context of we're all talking about data and collecting data, but data is only so useful unless you understand the actual context. And so I guess that's what I'm driving at. If procurement gets in, understands the context and the dynamics that take place within marketing, they'll be able to create better relationships with both the suppliers and the event managers and have a much greater effect.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Allison, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, I think Eric said some really great comments because, one thing that we talk about is that there's mystery in big numbers, and Eric's just quoting some really big numbers for the annual spend of the programs that he's working with. And the fact that, that the three of us on the phone and those of us in this industry, we know the context of everything, but the C-suite doesn't necessarily know. So this procurement coming in and being able to help understand the value of the events, whether they're incentive travel, business meetings, trade show events, it's great that people can see the data and understand the ROI and track the ROI more on these programs. When we do education, we try to tell people that procurement involvement is not necessarily a bad thing. You can have a more organized planning experience or a more thought out, purchasing process that thinks of things that are discussions happening when they need to and not when you're, on step 8 of step 10 in the event planning process. So, as a supplier, you can in some ways be dealing with people who are now more educated and know what they're doing. And as certainly you can hear from, Jason and Eric, who've spent years perfecting what they're doing.
Great, thank you so much, Allison. So kind of on to our next topic, the event team and procurement team clearly have very different goals. An event manager's focus is creating experiences, while procurement works to accomplish the goals of lowering the costs or getting the best value for the cost. So in many cases and in many companies, these two sides tend to butt heads and are very conflicting. So, I'd love to get a little bit from, Jason and Eric around how in your companies, how have you gotten procurement and events to kind of work together? And Jason, we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. So, like I mentioned before, I'm fortunate to have a great group of business partners I work with. Other subcategories or commodities, they don't necessarily have that benefit. So what we do is we really sit down and work together. It's not me, procurement, sending them the vendors they need to be using and here's exactly what you need to do, because that's going to start off as a bad working relationship from the beginning. So, Eric mentioned this in the previous question, stating that, by procurement assisting and driving the RFPs and the negotiating, it really gives that time back to the event managers to do what they need to do, which is manage the event. So where we're working together is, yes, procurement, I am trying to get the best value for the product or the services being offered, but I'm taking the business partners' inputs as well and looking at the vendors that they've used in the past and adding those vendors to these RFPs. So at least they're being looked at. And then when you get to compare apples to apples to, you know, some of these vendors that have been used in the past versus some of these new ones, you can really see what value we're getting from these vendors. And if it is the new vendor that the business partner's not really familiar with, it's very, with the RFP process, it's very nice to show them this is what you can get with this new vendor versus the vendor you've been using, and these are the cost savings you're going to be able to get by the new one. And then it's a much more, I guess, simple transition from one to the other because the facts are there.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Eric?
Well, I would say that I've been procurement or strategic sourcing for well over a decade, and the one thing that I know is that creative procurement, creative strategy and production, they all have a fear of procurement. That fear, at least in the beginning, they had real issue with procurement because procurement was coming in from a commodity standpoint, and at that point, about a decade ago, really didn't have a true understanding of how marketing a non-commodity really functioned. And so this fear was founded of procurement coming in and really clogging up the process that is marketing, and that somehow procurement's involvement was going to detract from the actual live event or the product that they were putting out. But procurement has been involved for well over a decade, and both sides have, I'd say, creative and the agencies have all realized that procurement is not going anywhere. And during that period of time, procurement has really taken the time to become much more sophisticated in their understanding of the entire marketing process. So there's been this meeting of the minds. And so marketing, they've realized that procurement's not going anywhere, and as they've become more sophisticated, they've created a much deeper level of their understanding of all the moving parts that happen within the creative process. And so I would say in the beginning, procurement, they would want to come in, drive an RFP, negotiate a contract, and declare the savings from the very beginning. But what they've learned is that the true savings within a marketing process really start after an agency or supplier has been selected. And so it's understanding that being able to select the appropriate agency or that supplier is everything that they've learned from working with the individual producers, that those relationships do matter, that chemistry really does matter, the timing of it all really matters, and all of those factors drive down to the actual cost that comes out at the end of the product. And so understanding those factors when you're going through an RFP process is really putting those critical factors into the selection process. It's not just the numbers that come back on a budget during an RFP phase, but it's really taking a much deeper dive with their marketing partners to understand which one of the suppliers they're going to select are really going to fit into the matrix of this large live event that you're putting in place. So you have an agency and you have all the suppliers, and they all have to come together and blend to put a beautiful product up on the stage or the event and then drive it effectively. So I think over time, procurements recognize that they have to create a specialty within their department who understands marketing and the creative process. And on the other side, marketing also become much more sophisticated in understanding of the value that they need to bring from a budgetary and fiduciary responsibility. And between the two of them have really started to create this specialized procurement offering, which is marketing procurement. You also get into language. So, I mean, procurement's coming from a different angle where they're using certain language of ROI, cost savings, and the like. And so what they've learned, and what I really try and educate everybody on, especially my client procurement, is that language. Procurement will use the term cost savings. And traditionally to procurement, cost savings means pre-contract negotiation. So you're getting a straight line discount, you're getting, they're going to take off $10,000 or whatever, and they establish their savings. And then there's things called concessions and cost avoidance, which in normal commodity-based type of procurement operations, those are nice things to have, but they really don't count on the scorecard. But when you get into live events, concessions and cost avoidance are really the two biggest areas to reduce costs. So it's a part of that understanding is a language barrier, and procurement understanding where they can help generate more value, that in the selection of these suppliers or these agencies, concessions and cost avoidance are really where they're going to drive the largest value, not only for the end product, but for their partners on the marketing side. So it's really an understanding that, and that kind of goes back to fear, that from a supplier or an agency standpoint, when procurement gets involved, they're driving towards the bottom line. They're going to look at your labor schedules, your labor rates, and they're just going to look at that one particular area. But because procurement's got more sophisticated in their understanding of what really drives actual cost, they're taking into account all of those things of chemistry, the team working together, and all cost concessions and avoidance. And when you pull the team together and they're working the right way, you're going to be able to reduce labor. You're going to be able to find a better solution to get the end product in terms of creative, which all drives down the cost. So it's really, over the last decade, just to kind of summarize, procurement and marketing have really met one another halfway, and it's really understanding the language that one another speaks.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. So I think we've kind of, gotten a little bit of an understanding of some of the changes that have happened in the event industry, how procurement has become involved, what it's trying to accomplish, what it needs to do. But, at the core of it, the words of spend visibility and, spend reporting are the big buzzwords. It's kind of what's kind of going on in our industry is some of the hottest words. What's the visibility? And really, we started talking about with procurement because it derives from procurement. Procurement was the ones who brought these words to the table because procurement needs visibility to be able to do all these things that we just heard, to be able to make these decisions. So, now we can make the shift a little bit to talk specifically about spend visibility and reporting and why it's important and how it helps to make decisions. So I'm going to start with, asking our panelists, why do you want these reports and why do you need the program spend, data as the words everyone uses, and why is this crucial data to have? And Allison, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I think when we talk about getting our arms around spend, it's really critical if you're going to talk about multiple or extended programs or even tracking your programs year over year. And for people outside of our industry, we can often equate it to, building a house. You know what a budget could be, or if you're going to build just one house. But what if you're going to build 100 of the same house? Well, now it's no longer 100 of the same house. You're going to have 100 that are one story, and then you're going to add another 50 that are two story. So the baseline is critical because when you're reporting on those costs, we all have this thing called scope. So as Eric described, this very detailed front-end process of all of these great things, as he said, then the real savings happens, after, when you're in the program and you've got this defined scope, and then everything starts changing. So, just really being able to articulate where those dollars are going and what the original intent was for those dollars, which I always think is just so equally important, and what's changed, you need to know the data.
Great. Thank you. Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, spend data, as I said before, data is the foundation for being able to analyze everything, but also context is equally important. And as what I've done within the agency is I set out and built this platform so that I could collect the data, not only the data of what we were spending, how much, and what categories, but who was spending it. and to be able to collect the context of how producers engage with their suppliers, how the suppliers perform, so you're getting actual feedback. So you get the data, the actual numbers, and then you get the context. And then I've spent a lot of time going on show site, getting involved in pre-production, working with through the creative process, the production process, and then visiting as many suppliers on their at their facilities as I can, so that when you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at the overall process, the data that you're looking at, you understand the context and you understand the value. Data is absolutely critical, and it's really understanding and then being able to take that data and then understand how you can relay it back to your suppliers. We've talked about the RFP process. We've talked about the scope of work that's in that RFP process. And really what I've learned over the 10 years is that when we as an agency receive an RFP and it details the scope of work of whatever it is we're going to produce, as hard as the client may try to be as detailed and as accurate with that scope of work, during the RFP phase, it's fiction. Really, because once you select the agency, and then that agency goes about selecting all their suppliers, now you go through pre-production. Now the agency and the client creatives start talking, and by the time you produce that event, from the time you awarded the event to the agency, the creative could be 180 degrees out of phase. And then it's being able to work with those suppliers and your agency to be able to produce that new creative for that event within the budget that was produced, or being able to have the right types of conversations so you can have change orders. And that's where procurement can really come in and assist. So during the RFP phase, being able to set out different types of guidelines of how many revisions can happen, when a PCN conversation really needs to happen between the client and the agency and the suppliers, and then being able to get in and understand the data, on a very granular level. So if you use audiovisual as an example, I mean, you can hire audiovisual. Procurement may get one line that says audiovisual, and they may see an overall number. They may be able to see what they've spent with each individual supplier. But if they are able to get in and understand this supplier was video, one was audio, one was rigging, and then you dive in even deeper, one was doing general session, one was doing breakouts, here's the different values that they bring. And then you can take those figures and understand which suppliers are doing, say, general session, and then take that and go talk to your producers and understand the value that those suppliers are bringing. The numbers may be the same between two different suppliers, but if you can go and talk to a technical director and understand that the $10,000 from this supplier is allowing us to expand our creative or gives us greater flexibility because of what they're bringing as opposed to this other supplier, then procurement gets to really understand what value is. The numbers may be the same, but the value wrapped up in those numbers could be vastly different. And so being able to collect data, not only the numbers, but the context and the understanding, then allows for a much more intelligent conversation, and then the selection and understanding of what the value that you're getting out of all your suppliers.
Well, thank you, Eric, and that was really helpful, explaining to us a little bit of kind of about what you do with your program spend, and how that insight helps you. Jason, can you share with us as well what you are going to do with what you do with this program spend information and the event spend information, and how that information helps you?
Yeah, Talia. So Eric really did a good job explaining it, at least from a procurement side. His AV example is one I use regularly as well. When we take that spend transparency, it really needs to be to the level of detail we need. Everyone talks about, the spend going into one bucket of indirect spend. Well, that doesn't really give you anything. So, actually with the assistance of Jack Morton, the Marcom events team here at Dell is able to get that level of detail we need from the spend transparency. And with that transparency, we're able to do really a lot of different things. And for procurement-specific negotiating tactics, we take that data, we use it for negotiating, we show the vendors what we're spending with them, because a lot of times, back in the day before procurement got involved, no one really knew exactly how much was being spent for what services and what level of detail it was going to these specific vendors. You know, we also have vendors doing a lot of different things for us. They might be an audiovisual vendor, they might be a full-blown event management vendor, they might be a production creative vendor, but without having that level of detail, you really don't know they did. So we take that, we use it for negotiating tactics, and also we're able to take that data and really look at how many vendors are offering the same services. So we might have 5 different vendors offering audiovisual services. You know, we dig into the data, see what kind of rates we're getting with some of the others, and we're able to reduce that number of suppliers we have onboarded just because of data. Obviously, strategy involved, but the data is the start. And then also with that, we're able to consolidate a lot of our services to the vendors we already have onboarded. So if we have one vendor that can offer 5 different things, or 5 vendors that can offer one thing apiece, you know, negotiating wise, preferred rate wise, reduced cost wise, makes sense to go with that one supplier who can offer 5 different things.
And I think if I could add to that just really quickly, I think, you know, the reverse is true for suppliers. So Jason mentioned that many clients, and even as an agency, you'll have a difficulty of understanding of what your true spend within a category may be. The suppliers have that difficulty too. And the challenge within, say, the event marketing world is most events they're project-based. And so when you're negotiating with suppliers, they're negotiating on that particular project. So to the point where procurement can provide to their preferred suppliers real data about what the overall opportunity in their particular area might be over a given quarter or a given year or a period of time, and provide more information to the suppliers, the more the suppliers are comfortable in understanding and being able to provide greater discounts or concessions. So it's a two-way street with the data.
Great, thank you, Eric. Allison, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if we take it back up to the overall arching value of why we're doing meetings and events and what that ultimate measurement piece is and the corporate objective, you know, that's the other reason we need all this data. If we look specifically at, say, the incentive events are directly related to incremental increased revenue in new sales and in new other programs, and so those are always directly measured on how they've fared at the end of the day. But it's no different if you're doing a roadshow that's because it's related to new product launches or new other things. I mean, so it's not only this internal managing the expense per project and per individual event. But again, we need to be smarter at the end of the day, always being able to discuss and speak proudly to the value of face-to-face experiences.
Great, thank you so much, Allison. And we've got about 15 minutes here before we're going to try and have some time for Q&A, and I have a couple more topics that I'd love to go into with our panelists. One being a little bit about preferred supplier networks, because we've kind of talked about that quite a bit here as a tie-in between procurement and spend visibility and how to drive everything. So, you know, it really seems like everything drives starting from a preferred vendor program or preferred supplier program, and visibility into that spend helps you create a preferred supplier or vendor program and partner with those suppliers better and aggregate your buying power. So I guess I'd like to discuss a little bit about the benefits of that preferred program for both the company as well as for the suppliers. I think there's a huge benefit for suppliers that companies are creating preferred networks and their ability to get onto that preferred network and the benefits they can versus having to, you know, have every single event as a one-off and try and gain that business. And then, of course, how tying back then how the visibility into the spend helps manage this preferred program. So kind of gonna start with Jason and talk a little bit about why is it beneficial for you as a company and also for your suppliers, you know, to have this preferred, as you call it, vendor program or supplier network, and then, you know, how the visibility really helps you to manage who should be on. And I know you touched on that a little bit, but maybe just kind of tie that back together for us.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I was given the task to come up with the preferred vendor list in the event space, as well as compliance for 90% spend to be through that preferred vendor list. So just to give you an idea, I started out with 650 vendors. I didn't really know where to start with that, so naturally I started with the data. So going through the data and beginning the process of coming up with a true preferred vendor list, you know, we did RFPs, we did benchmarks, worked with the partners, we put strategic models in place. We did a lot of sourcing strategies to come up with a true preferred vendor list, not just pick and choose who should be on it. So that 650 amount of vendors has since been reduced to 240, and we're still working. Again, it goes back to that data, consolidation, supplier reduction, understanding the spend. We do have over 90% spend running through the preferred vendor list as well. So compliance there and adherence to the procurement policies is being welcomed by the events and the event manager teams. So with the preferred vendor list, you know, we're getting the reduced rates, we're getting rebates possibly, we're getting percentages off here and there where they can, because like I mentioned before, the suppliers know if they're on our preferred vendor list or our preferred supplier list, they're going to get the business from Dell. You know, and with these preferred vendors, we have low risk. You know, they're familiar with our brand. They know the message we're trying to provide. You know, the power to do more. The event managers more than likely have worked with them on several different occasions. They're familiar with them. There's that trusting relationship from both sides, and we maintain. You know, with an event, you could have 100 different subcategories. You know, for the bigger ones, you know, we keep a couple, 2, 3, or 4 different preferred vendors on that list, really, you know, to keep prices competitive and be able to offer that event space creativity, because as you all know, the event space is a very creative mind, so it needs a lot of different looks.
Great, thank you. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about third-party planners, and you know, I know Allison, you know, as part of Site, you see a lot of that, and Eric, as Jack Morton, you guys really are a third party, and I think we've got a lot of people on our call today that run third-party meeting planning companies, and I know kind of from my own observation, it's sort of like the difference between having a company hiring a third party that is a sophisticated business partner or non-sophisticated. And I think for a while, you know, a third party could create really great events and execute against them, and you know, and they could get the business as a third party. And I think that, you know, we're really seeing a trend towards companies really expecting their third parties to be a lot more sophisticated, and that business sophistication, as it is across any industry, is all about having data, understanding your business, being able to make strategic business decisions, and not just, oh, because this is what I think or this is what I know. So a lot of that is changing. So I guess, you know, Allison, I'd like to start with you. As you know, with how do third parties, you know, create a more competitive advantage for themselves by having a preferred supplier program in place and by having the business sophistication of understanding the data and what the value is that they can bring to their clients by, you know, what their business that they do with their suppliers?
Yeah, Talia, I completely agree with you. I mean, when I started in this industry well over 20 years ago, I mean, it was difficult when you were saying, I'm going from Chicago and I'm going to do an event in New Orleans, and now I'm looking at it on a global basis. You know, I'm in Chicago and I'm going to do an event in Johannesburg. And so I think the sophistication and the expectations of people is most definitely there on a broader scale than ever before. So what we see is we see the advent of a lot of growing global supplier networks. So it's not only are companies interconnected within their own countries and even their own continents, but now they've expanded beyond. And we see some of them trying to grow up and trying to make their brand and their processes more uniform across the board. And I think there are a lot of benefits to that if you can get on one of these preferred supplier programs or networks, but also, you know, you still have to earn it. How do I want to say? You still have to earn it by each office that you represent, but there is an absolute benefit because you'll kind of get to the top of that list a lot faster. So I'm going to open it up to somebody else then to make some comments as well.
Yeah, so Eric, let's talk, because I think you guys, as you mentioned before, Jack Morton has, as a third party who manages a lot of that spend on behalf of their client, is, you know, it's been a big differentiator for you guys, and, you know, it's been really crucial to your success. And, you know, again, I want you to kind of share that a little bit with a lot of the different people who are on this call, and they run their own third-party companies and probably need to compete for business all the time, and, you know, really want to know some of these things and kind of how you do it and why it's important.
You want me to give away all my secrets? All right.
just share your knowledge.
Right. Well, I mean, it's been a huge differentiator. I mean, back in the day, I mean, when you were producing a live event, agencies or third parties were able to make their money both on their fees that they were charging, but they were also able to mark up third party. As procurement's got involved and clients have gotten more sophisticated, they're requiring that all third party is passed through with no markup. So then an agency or third party is, they make their revenue on the fees that they charge for the services they provide. So at the agency that I represent, I mean, we produce live events, and so I coined a term. It's called the 2080 term. And so when you're producing a live large event, the agency's fees, and this would be true for all agencies producing a large event, their fees typically, and this all comes from data analysis, but the fees of the agencies usually represent about 20% to 30% of the overall budget to produce a live event. The other 70 to 80% is all wrapped up in the third party that agency is now managing in sourcing on behalf of their client. So the benefit that and the differentiator that strategic sourcing has brought to our agency is that we've been able to aggregate in a very intelligent way all of the third party, create production procurement methodologies and processes that are been designed specifically for the event marketing process to reduce that the cost going directly to our clients. So if I get involved into one particular event, if I can effectively reduce the overall cost of that 80% by just 5%, that's the equivalent of having to reduce our fees, that 20%, by 10% or 20%, excuse me. So it's made a huge difference. In the beginning, procurement would come in and say an agency like ourselves, we're being looked at to produce a large live event. We've responded to the RFP, which has required a budget, so it includes our fees and all the third party. Unfortunately, a lot of times procurement, they flip to the back page and they start looking directly at our fees and they're trying to analyze our fees as opposed to our competitors' third party fees. And if that's the only thing that they're looking at, it could be a huge mistake on the client's procurement department because they're not taking into account all of that third party. Because we've created this special strategic sourcing, I mean, it's an entire department. I work with all the event managers. You know, for a client to be able to look at an agency or a third party and truly understand that they're going to work on our behalf. They're going to manage this huge amount of spend. They're going to be doing the sourcing, the negotiating, and it's all passing through to us. If you really have that capability and you can convey and then report back to the client that you're able to affect that third party have more of an impact on that third party than your competitors, it really does become a huge differentiator. And then being able to collect that data, both the data and the context, and be able to get the client to understand and agree. And if you can have the client deeply involved in the process as well, it really sets the stage for a great relationship. I mean, the game within events is that a client will come down and they will have earmarked a budget for a particular event. Let's just say it's $10 million. Really, the game in this in this industry is you're going to spend $10 million on that particular project. Then it's really a matter of which agency can you hire that's going to give you the biggest bang for that $10 million in terms of creative. So, you know, working with our event managers, our account executives, and working with the clients and going through the entire process is being able to put in front of them in the beginning, through pre-production, and even through reconciliation, especially through reconciliation. Here's the total invoice of the actuals that you've spent on the event, and here's why you got so much value. Yes, you're spending $5 million on the third party, but in actuality, you got $10 million worth of value, and here's why, and here's how. So, I mean, it's a huge differentiator, and it makes a tremendous amount of difference. And it's also helped educate many different clients about how they develop their procurement operation and how they're going to analyze the selection and manage their suppliers. And then I call it trickle-down procurement. You know, as procurement within an agency, I work with all of our suppliers as if I were an account executive, you know, working with a client. And so I have standard meetings with all of our preferred suppliers. I've gained their trust over time. They understand that while I can't ever guarantee them a certain amount of business, because I've taken the time to understand and create relationships across the entire organization, and that I've now become a central point for them, that if they're named a preferred supplier within Jack Morton, I make their job a lot easier. Suppliers may come in, previously they may have come into Jack Morton and may have developed a relationship with a specific office or a specific producer, and they may get a decent amount of business from that relationship. But then their job was, how do you penetrate the rest of the organization? It's a global organization, and it all broke down, and they had to spend a lot of time, effort, and money trying to broaden their opportunity within the organization. Now, because all the suppliers come through strategic sourcing, they're vetted properly, they have all their paperwork in place, they've come through recommendations from other event managers. Now I set up introductions across the offices. You know, in the amount of effort and work that they have to put into expanding their relationships and opportunity within the organization greatly reduce. So and then I end up working with our preferred suppliers to help analyze their operation and where I may be able to assist them in their third party with their overhead or whatever. So it's all really getting to understand one another's business and working together so each can work more effectively and more efficiently.
Thank you.
And if you let me, I'll talk all day. So
thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. No, it's such great insight, and thank you for sharing all of that, all of your secrets, as you say. So we've got one last question, and then we're going to go to some of our questions from those people who are listening today. And of course, it kind of comes down to my favorite subject, which is all around the technology. You know, this is an industry where a lot of people are still doing the same thing they've done for 40 years. They're trying to use Excel and Word and, you know, reconcile and email, right, versions going back and forth. And, you know, we talked a lot about data and aggregating data and business analytics, and it is very difficult to try and do that when everybody has an individual file with individual Excel documents in their own, you know, desktop computers or emails going back and forth. So, you know, clearly technology plays a huge role in moving this industry forward and getting the business analytics and getting the visibility, as we talked about. So I'd love to hear, you know, a little bit from our panelists about, you know, the technology and how that's important for you in what you're trying to accomplish. So we'll start with Jason. And just so you guys, we've got probably about a minute and a half, you know, or to 2 minutes for each of you, so that we can make sure that we've got some time for some questions at the end.
Okay, great. I'll make it quick and easy. So yeah, the technology, you know, like a platform Evid offers, you know, it really simplifies everything within the event space. When you have the ability to go to one area as a one-stop shop to track your spend, to pull up preferred vendors, to do an RFP generator with the click of your mouse, it really gives back the time needed for other reasons within your division, whether you're an event manager or whether you're in procurement, trying to come up with new strategies and benchmarking industry best standards. So having that technology, especially like Evan has, because with that one-stop shop, you can have suppliers in there marketing themselves. You can have procurement in there negotiating, capturing spend, selecting vendors. You can have the event managers in there looking up suppliers that they need to use for their specific areas that they're working on, whether it's a trade show or, hosting a huge event or even sponsorship stuff out there. So it really, to make this short and easy, it simplifies everything within the business, so procurement, business, and supplier, and it gives back a lot of time needed for other areas.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. So, Allison, what's your thought on this?
Well, I think for me, the fact that when you work globally, that technology is a 24/7 platform, and it's working all the time, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. But really, it's all about, as Jason said, it's all about efficiencies and simplicity, and I think when you have an organized technology platform that has a sufficient process, then doing things like reminding somebody that you don't have their proper certificate of insurance on file, it's part of a process versus you interfering with your personal relationship. Because as we said a few times on this call, in the creative event and relationship side, that's equally as important to your bottom line, these healthy relationships. So if you have this technology that has a set process that you can, that your partners understand that this process is happening, it helps with those relationships as well.
Okay, great. And before we just go to Eric on this, I just want to remind everybody that you can chat in your questions. If you go up to your toolbar, there's a little icon that says chat, and then you can just send them to the host with your questions so that we can try and get that answered for you today. All right, Eric, technology, one of your favorite subjects.
Right. So, Jason and Allison have both hit on many of the key aspects of having the technology. We've talked about procurement getting more and more involved over the last decade, and as they've gotten more involved, they've identified more areas that the producers or creative people have to take into account when they're selecting and working and managing their suppliers. There's risk management, there's, their fiduciary responsibilities, or budget creation, there's RFPs, and all of these things are vitally important. But at the same time, it saps the creative and producers from doing their real job, which is producing that event and being creative and coming up with the strategies for the real reason why the client has hired them. So if you have this platform that allows them, I call it, a bunch of easy buttons that allows an event manager or producer to go in and source the suppliers, to understand that they're properly vetted, and not only that, but to gain feedback about how that supplier may have performed on previous events within your company or within other companies. And then, as I've seen, I'm getting old now, and I've been in the industry for going on 18 years. And so you've got a younger generation coming in that have all grown up on the internet and are used to having, their smartphone and their apps and being able to, buy things on Amazon or be on Facebook or do all these things. And I see it every day. You have, new event managers coming in from college, and they just don't get it. They're used to having all these different types of technologies, and how can an industry that is working with so many, Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies that are all about technology, how can we not have the technology? So now, there used to be a pushback from, marketing and production that, it is a creative process. It's all relationship driven. But now, because procurement's been involved, they've gained an understanding. There's that sophistication. Now we're not trying to repurpose old procurement technologies and refit them, put that square peg in a round hole, but we've actually got enough knowledge and understanding of the process, the relationships, and from a marketing standpoint. So now we're building technologies that meet the new procurement guidelines for marketing, but actually assist, through the entire marketing and creative process. And as Allison said, it is global now, so you're not relegated to just who are the suppliers in your town or your region, but you may be hired to produce an event over in Europe or in South America. and then having the technology where you can easily go in and find the suppliers or those people who have the relationships. I mean, it's vitally important. And the other thing is that, you know, single databases have been created or technologies have been created to take care of certain aspects. And so what I've seen is that people become confused. There's so many databases and so many different separate processes that you have to go through, and things can be lost through the cracks. Now to have a complete platform that takes you from, you know, from A to Z and provides assurances to the event managers and production crew that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, it just, all the benefits Allison and Jason said, and so much more. And now event managers in production, they have direct input. The relationship between procurement and marketing is getting better every single day, and they're helping to innovate and to expand these technologies in the platform. But I mean, it's nothing but a good thing. So I mean, the younger generation is coming up; they're expecting it, and I think you know, the industry is starting to provide that technology.
Thank you, Eric. All right, so we've got a question from one of the people who are on the call. This is a question for Jason. They says, I have a small third-party meeting company. I assume that you guys use, other than the production agencies, you have third-party planning companies. How important is it to you that your third parties, you know, who have to manage some of your spend, that they actually have a preferred program and that they actually can give you visibility into the spend? And do you think that's going to be important for other companies in order to get their business?
Yes, that is definitely important. If we're using third parties, you know, working on behalf of Dell, we absolutely must have the spend transparency and where our money's going. Because at the end of the day, you know, the event manager's budget is paying for this, so we need to know where it's going. And it always does help if these third parties have their own preferred vendors, because like we've mentioned several times, if they have a preferred vendor, they're getting the better rates and the trusting relationship and the understanding of, you know, the brand and working together. So to answer your question, yes, we would, you know, want to see that data. We would recommend, you know, you all having a preferred vendor list yourselves, just to take advantage of the opportunities that list has.
Okay, Allison, a question that came in for you. What do you think those companies that don't start to adopt technology, what do you think is going to happen to those companies?
Well, I think they're going to get left behind. I mean, it's a couple things that we've just said is that, you know, you one, have to be available 24/7 because one, this industry moves so fast, and I think about that in my life of what I do. I have people that tweet me and expect me to answer, that just send me notes on Facebook that expect me to answer, LinkedIn. I mean, my notes come in every which way and upside down. So one, you have to be technology savvy, and I think that you have to be looking for the efficiencies. I mean, we know that if you're a smaller third party, or if you're an independent planner, or wherever you sit in this great global meetings industry, you can't afford to build some of these technology infrastructures by yourself. You can't. Technology costs money. And so what you have to be looking for is you have to be looking for any technology source that can help you, one, be easily accessible, and two, make sure that it's cost effective and efficient for you. I think, as Eric said, I mean, when I started in this business, I ran 500-man labor calls and kept track of all of the laborers by longhand, you know, all of the hours, and I'm glad those days are gone. But the new challenge is we all have to be very open to being technology savvy, no matter what that platform is. So it's a must in today's business world.
All right, and we have time for one last question with a very short answer because we're just hitting the end. And the question is, why have previous attempts at utilizing existing procurement technologies to manage marketing spend been less than successful? And that is a quick question for you, Eric, before we close.
Because those technologies were developed for commodity-based industries, and again, it's the square peg going into a round hole. And those old technologies were built for industries that had the time. I mean, when you get into our particular industry, especially coming off of the recession, the amount of time that companies are given to go through pre-production through the entire process has been condensed even more. And so being able to use those technologies were built for, again, commodity-based industries, and they just don't jive with so many gymnastics have had to be completed in order to even make it work, and it just clogs up the entire marketing process. So as I said earlier, now technologies are being built from scratch that are based on the marketing process and developing in procurement methodologies designed specifically for the marketing process.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to just thank all three of you, Allison, Jason, and Eric. You guys have been great and truly, leaders that are innovating our industry and innovating our space, and, excited to follow and all the things that you guys are doing and watching. And I'm sure that our audience, really learned quite a bit from you guys today. So thank you so much. I want to let everyone know that our second, and I also want to thank Site very much as a partner and working with us on these education series. And I'd also like to let everyone know that our second part of the series, which is Better Buying, How Preferred Supplier Programs Can Help Your Business, will be on Thursday, May 2nd at 11 Central, 12 Eastern, and you can register. And once again, thank you to our panelists, and everyone should have a great day.
Thank you. I hope everybody else has a great day.
Thank you.